Sound.
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 Sound. Sound. Sound.
Found in Sound.
Hi, welcome to Found in Sound. My name is Laura Kelsey, and I'm a musician and filmmaker in Nanaimo, BC. I want to acknowledge that the series was filmed on the traditional territories of the Nanaimo, Snanawas, and Samanis First Nations. Found in Sound explores the potential benefits sound and music can have on human physical, mental, and emotional health through interviews with musicians, therapists, dancers, sound workers, and more. But before we explore the helpful possibilities of sound, let's start with the basics. What is sound and how does it work?
Hi, my name is Tom Leavitt, and I am an instructor here at Vancouver Island University with the Faculty of Academic and Career Preparation. I teach math and physics here, and I've been working at VIU for 30 years, and I taught high school for 4 years before that. And before that, I played a lot of music, so I'm a musician as well, and I still play music. I play guitar and mandolin and a little bit of bass. And I talk about all that when I do my wave unit in physics. We're going to talk about how sound gets generated and what happens to the molecules that are in between what's making the sound and you hearing the sound. And we're going to start with this little mass on a spring here. And it tells us a couple of things. So first of all, I need some sort of mass. I need some sort of material, especially for a sound wave. Has to have a medium. Sound does not travel through a vacuum. Secondly, that medium is under some sort of tension. And in this case, it's fairly obvious that without the weight, the spring hangs there. But with the weight, the spring hangs down here like this. And if I let it sit still long enough, it has sort of settled in that position, which we call the equilibrium position. In the equilibrium position, there's no force on that mass, so there's no acceleration, and it's kind of where the system wants to be. So if I disturb that mass, if I pull it off of equilibrium, for instance, and let it go, it wants to get back to the equilibrium position. So if I pull it down, it'll go back up, but it gains speed when it does that, so it goes past the equilibrium position and then tries to get back down to the equilibrium position. And that'll set up this little vibration that I'll show you right here. So that mass is bouncing around its equilibrium position. Of course, if we let it bounce long enough, it'll stop. And where it will stop will be back at that equilibrium position. That's a vibration, and we call it a periodic vibration because it keeps on happening. And that's what generates sound, at least in the context of music that we're talking about here. Lots of sounds can be generated in different ways. You can have a single bang, things like this, but we're talking about music, and that takes a periodic motion like this that's fairly repetitive, and it generates a frequency, how many times it bounces up and down per second. Now, it looks like just a vibration, up and down. But it's not just any old vibration. This is called simple harmonic motion. And it's different than just back and forth. If you think of, say, people watching a tennis match, and their heads might be going back and forth watching the ball go back and forth, or the ball itself in a tennis court bouncing back and forth. That is not simple harmonic motion. It is a back and forth motion, something like a vibration, but it isn't this. This has very specific properties. So here's my mass bouncing up and down. This is my equilibrium position. It's where it wants to be. So at equilibrium, acceleration is 0, but when it's bouncing, my velocity is a maximum. Out here at the extreme parts of that vibration, my acceleration is a maximum, but my speed, or my velocity, is 0. And the same thing up here, my acceleration is a maximum, and my speed is 0. So not just everything that bounces back and forth has those properties, but that is what we would call simple harmonic motion, and that is how your instruments are vibrating And that's what happens to the medium. So the molecules of the medium in between the instrument and you hearing it, that's what the molecules are doing. They're vibrating harmonically as well. And that all reaches your ear, and then that's how you detect sound, with that simple harmonic motion.
So how does that work with a sound wave?
The sound wave will look like this. I'll sort of pull back some coils like this, and that compression kind of transmits itself back and forth between our hands. And the transmission or the medium is going this way, the wave is also going that way, and that we call a longitudinal wave. Once the sound wave gets off the guitar string into the air, what eventually reaches your ear is a longitudinal wave like that. Also, notice the medium does not travel down the spring. So even though I've got a compression here, it just transmits itself along the medium. So when the sound wave hits air, it doesn't push air molecules all the way from the instrument to you. It transmits that energy from molecule to molecule until it hits your ear. Just like that. It's the coils that are moving in simple harmonic motion. The wave is constant speed back and forth. So acceleration here, but no acceleration this way. And then that's going to take off in air, and the same thing. It's going to move at a constant velocity up to our ears.
So sound is created by a ripple effect. It starts at a source and then vibrates a series of air molecules that reach our ears. But what happens once it reaches our ears? How is it processed by the brain? Here's Sam Ryan of SOS Music, who is a mix and master engineer and lead audio instructor at SAE Vancouver School of Audio Engineering, with his definition of sound.
Sound is an interpretation from your brain. It's an interpretation of electric signals through the nervous system that are caused by variations of air pressure. So what you're hearing is not the actual vibration. Your brain is modeling an experience that it is interpreting as sound. And the same even goes with our senses like sight. We feel like we're seeing the outside world, but we're not. It's like light is hitting you right at the edge of your lenses. And it's like, do you think we have tentacles sticking out in the world to actually feel where things are or see where they are? No, the light is hitting you right here, and that's converted into electrical signals, and your brain is constructing the whole space of where things are. So it's exactly the same with sound. So it is an interpretation of the brain, and so if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, well, there's no interpretation of the brain to create the experience of what sound is. When I teach in my audio program, that's a really good starting point. Because there's a big difference between what's happening versus our perception of what's happening. And as an audio engineer and as an audio creator, you want to dissect those two things, because as an audio engineer, I'm dealing with what's really happening. Like I'm dealing with a microphone picking up vibrations of the air, and I'm working with electrical signals and whatnot. And then on the other side of it, there's our brain's interpretation of it. And there's a gap between the two. And there's a lot of areas where I can fool someone. Like I can make something sound louder, but it actually has physically less amplitude. Or I could make like an illusion of pitch, for example. Like I could say play a note like and on an equalizer I could filter out the low harmonic, the low note that we're actually hearing, and my brain still hears the note even though it's not there. So it's like my brain is kind of filling in the blanks. So it's a little bit hard to talk about sound without putting the brain into the equation, because it's such a big part of the well, it is the whole experience actually. On the other side of it though is sound. Let's talk about sound not as a perception, but sound as vibrating, as vibrations in whichever medium. Air for us, that's how we generally hear sound. I do feel like that there's a lot to unwrap there as far as how it works and what the effects are. One place to start is with standing waves. There actually is attractive principles or organization organizational principles of sound when there's certain dynamics that happen. And one of those dynamics in particular to point out is standing waves. And so a standing wave is a feedback loop of sorts that creates an interference pattern that combs out a bunch of information. And so I'm just going to give you a demo here to just give you an idea of it. So I've got a white noise generator here, and what white noise is, it's all frequencies randomized at the same volume. So it's basically just all frequencies at once. So it's just a little psh. So that's just a little shot of white noise. And I'm going to throw this delay plugin on it, and you'll hear when I hit the noise, you'll hear a delay. Yeah. So this is just a delay plugin. So there's the original noise plus some delay. What I'm going to do is move my delay time down to faster than what we can hear. I'm going to move it down to 1 millisecond. So this is like 1,000th of a second. So it's faster than my brain's ability to hear those individual pieces. When I'm listening to just the delayed sound, there's no difference between the delay being on or off other than it's 1 millisecond later. So there's no difference. But when I add the original sound plus this 1 millisecond later sound, you get what's called a comb filter. And so there's these nodes where you've got these interference patterns which combs out all this information out of the noise. And you notice there's some geometry to it. And what's interesting is when you add feedback to that, so it's like we've combed out a bunch of information, and then when we add that information back into itself another millisecond later, it combs out the same thing, and then we add it back in another millisecond later, so it creates this loop. And you'll notice the dips stay the dips, but what's in between kind of builds up, and out of that gives birth to a note. So from noise, we've created a note. So noise is disorganization of sorts, and we've just organized it into a note through a feedback loop. Now, I'm just playing with the millisecond time here. And I'm playing a little melody just with delay time. To take that concept out of the computer and into the acoustic space here, anytime that you hear a note in the real world, it's actually a standing wave. So it's the same principle that we just showed you in the computer where it's noise that's looped. And the actual energy that's going into the guitar string here is just a little click. It's a little, which is actually just a very short burst of noise. If you were to look at it, it would actually be a wide band burst of frequencies, kind of like that white noise, the psh. And what's happening is that little psh, the energy of it is expanding through the string. It's hitting the bridge and the nut, and it's reflecting back now as 2 bubbles instead of 1 bubble. And when it reflects back on itself, you're getting some energy that's pushing this way and some energy that's pushing that way, which causes a null point, which removes certain information out of that little noise burst. And it creates a cascade of effects because you end up getting a bunch of opposing pressures, and it sets up this geometrical sequence, which is actually harmonics, if you're familiar with harmonics of a string. Those are all those node points. You can even get a sense of it with my voice. If I hit a note and make it low enough, you can hear like those individual little picks, like, oh. You can hear it's just pick, 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 pick. And you speed those picks up. It's a note with all these harmonics in it. And so, and how these notes occur is it's because it's a feedback loop. The energy is stuck inside of a container of sorts, and the energy feeds back on itself, and it ends up organizing it destructively takes out everything that isn't the note, and it leaves this resonance behind. And that's some of the organizational power of a standing wave. Okay, so speaking of the organizational principles of sound, there's an installation that I did at the Sound Symposium on Gabriola Island this summer, which was a lot of fun. We ended up taping a hose with water going through it to a subwoofer. And so the subwoofer pushed the hose in and out. And I put a tone through the subwoofer, I was playing with the tones, but like a low tone. So I was playing with around 30 hertz, 20 to 30 hertz. So the speaker's moving back and forth 20 to 30 times a second. And in turn, it's wiggling the water that's coming out 20 to 30 times a second. And what was really neat about it is when you looked at it through a camera, say the camera, like a normal frame rate for a camera is around 30 pictures per second. And so it takes a picture of where that wave is at every 30th of a second. And it was a real insight as to the organizational principle of sound and the effect of it. I moved to Vancouver Island about 2 years ago, and I've been in the studio business and production business for a long time, actually full-time since 1997. And a year and a half ago, I got a grant to upgrade my studio to Dolby Atmos. So I've got this whole surround sound system in here. There's 7 speakers around us and 4 speakers above. And Dolby Atmos, as you've probably experienced in movie theaters, is an immersive audio experience and is now available in music. And I've been waiting for this technology to get accessible for a long time now, and I've got my little playground here where I can just get immersed in audio, a full 3D audio playground.
Because at first I was like, well, it's like I was wearing headphones, but at the same time, it's not, because things are happening over here, like way behind, that you couldn't just put in a headphone, I feel like, right? Yeah. So you've got stuff coming from behind, then you've got movement going across, and I don't even know how you would mix that. Like,
I really believe sound and vibration it's a profound thing about just how deep the concepts go. Like I believe even how atoms work and how the solar system, it's all vibration of one sort. It's all frequency of one sort. So I'm a big advocate for the power of vibration. That being said, as far as actual sound, like vibrations in the air and its healing effect on the body, or its effect on the body, I feel like a lot of that effect is actually psychological as opposed to you actually wiggling things in your body from the air. Because your body has quite an acoustic impedance to, it's kind of like me trying to punch the wall, but I'm not touching it. And so very little of that energy gets into the wall. And it's kind of the same thing with wiggling air. Very little of that wiggling actually gets into your body. That being said, if you go to a concert and you put yourself in front of a bunch of 18-inch subwoofers, I think you really feel it resonating your chest and inside. And I feel like that's definitely enough energy to get in there and start wiggling things around. But I think a lot of the profound effect of what people experience with sound, I think a lot of it has to do more with the psychology and the experience of it. And it's very powerful psychologically how our brains react to not just sound, but to harmony on so many different levels. Harmony, the cultural levels, like language. It's such a multi-dimensional thing. And so I think a lot of the benefits of that have to do with our brain's interpretation of it, and then all of the chemicals your brain sends out into your body that might relax you and give various positive effects. That being said, I feel like you can get sound into your body maybe an easier way by actually creating a physical connection. Like some sound healers have like tuning forks and stuff, and if you were to put that on part of your, like a bone or something, you can actually get that rattling. Just recently I've started playing around with this sub pack, which I got for a different reason. So this sub pack is actually, it's like a subwoofer that doesn't make sound in the air. So it's a transducer. It's essentially a little vibrator or like a little massager. and it's meant to have a direct connection. So you're meant to put this on and it goes right against your back. And there's a little transducer in there that vibrates. And I bought it just for mixing when I'm making music in headphones. Part of the experience of music actually is the feeling of it. And this really feels like you're going up against some 18-inch subwoofers and you're feeling that rattle. And the weird thing is it makes almost no sound in the air. So that's the sound, quote unquote sound. It's not actually sound, it's vibration. And it's going straight into your spine. I've just used this as a mixing tool, but recently I've started to play around with this from a bit of just playing around with sound and its possible healing effects of putting a microphone through and you actually being able to use your voice and that amplifying the signal into this. And it's kind of like you can control a massager with your voice, really is what it is.
It's like you're giving yourself a back rub.
So sound is amazing when you're looking at it in the real world and what like looking at cymatics and looking at all these different interesting phenomenon. But I think the psychology of sound is absolutely huge, and like the healing aspects of it. Like I feel like myself as a music producer, a lot of the projects that I work on, a majority of them, it's healing work for people. People are bringing stuff that matters to them. They're making art that matters to them and they're expressing it in meaningful ways. So there's like all sorts of layers of meaning. And then there's just the sound itself. As a producer, I'm like, either I've got this feeling inside me that I want to express, right? And so when I'm looking for a sound, I'm going through until I'm finding a sound that kind of gives me that feeling back, right? And I don't know what it is that's giving me that feeling back, whether it's just my relationship with it, or maybe the sound is doing something interesting to my psychology, like brainwave entrainment or something, I don't know.
Wait, what's brainwave entrainment?
I want to talk about brainwave entrainment through binaural beats, which is a pretty interesting phenomenon. There's a thing called beat frequencies, which I can show you here. When you're tuning a guitar, what you're tuning is, hear that beating? What we're trying to do when we're tuning is to take the beating out. And what the beating is it's the out-of-tuneness of the waves. We're trying to synchronize them so that the waves are not kind of canceling on themselves and creating that beating pattern. That's called beating. And with the help of technology, we can really play with this beating. What we can do is we can put a tone in one ear, say it's like 100 hertz, and we could put almost the same tone in the other ear, say 105 hertz. And what's interesting is those two tones, if you were to play them together, they would beat and you'd create a 5 hertz wobble. So it'd be like, whoa, 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 like 5 times a second, you'd hear this little vibration. But what's interesting is if you pan one left and pan the other right, so you hear one tone out of the left ear and the other tone out of the right ear, they aren't actually combining those two signals. They're combining in your brain, because those two sounds never actually meet except for in your brain. But the weird thing is you still hear that whoa, 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 whoa beating effect. And so that beating effect actually is brainwave entrainment, and you can measure it on an EEG. So I'll just show you here. What we have is I have two sine waves, one pan to the left and one pan to the right. And if I detune one and the other one up a little bit, we can hear a bit of a whoa, 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 whoa pattern. If you listen to this on headphones, try it. That beating that you're hearing is in your brain. If you're to listen to just one ear, there is no beating. If you listen to the other ear, there is no beating. And so when you play the two together, that whoa, whoa, whoa that you're hearing is actually your brainwave synchronizing to that rate. And as far as the effects of brainwave entrainment goes, there's debate as to how they might be effective for some people. Like I think the theory is that if you can play different brainwave entrainment frequencies to match consciousness states, like say like what is it, like delta brainwaves, and like I think when we're like awake and conscious, our brains, I don't know, usually around like 20 to 30 cycles per second, but when we relax it goes down to like 12, 8, something like that, 6 even when we're super relaxed. So I think that's kind of the idea of those. I'm not sure how effective it is, but I think the idea is pretty compelling, that just you hearing 2 different tones, that your brainwaves can actually synchronize and entrain to that.